What's the most satisfying act of revenge that you've ever experienced? It was actually against me. If that gives you any clue as to how justified and perfect it was. When I was 4 and my brother was 6, we were on our way to my great-grandfather's funeral. My parents stop at McDonald's, and out of my brother's small fry bag, the 4.5-inch tall white bag of fries, he pulls an 11-fry Impossible right. We're in the back seat. I see it. He yells to my parents to witness this awesome fry, but before they can turn around I snatch it and eat it. He is upset. Whatever. Cut to 12 years later. Home after school. No parents. Friends hanging out in the kitchen. Everyone is scurrying around for an after-school snack. My brother and I are at the table and our friends are in the other part of the kitchen. Out of this bag of wavy Lays, I pull a potato chip that is literally the size of my skull. No idea how this thing didn't break in transit. I'm like, oh my god. Guys, look at this chip. Before anyone can even turn their heads, my brother reaches across with his right hand and crushes the chip to crumbs. I have WTF eyes bearing down on him and he simply says, that's for the fry. 12 years had passed and we had never spoken about it, but it took less than a second to remember everything, and just nod in agreement that the score was settled. One enormous potato product for another. True story. At my school we had a douchebag who liked to stand next to his locker talking to one of his friends, and when someone got too close to it he'd slam it open into their face. As there were no cameras near this hallway, it was always dismissed as an accident. Anyways, one day he felt the need to open it into my best friend's face. Gave him a bloody nose and almost broke it. Now, as I'm sure you all would be, I was pissed off. So the day my friend got back, the douche felt the need to approach him to apologize about hitting my friend. Luckily, my locker was located between my friend and the other kid. When I saw I could do it, I casually unlocked my locker, waited for him to get close to it, and slammed it into him. Broke his nose and dented the locker. Revenge is sweet. For years and years in late elementary school and most of middle school, this one kid would just bully me constantly. Towards the end of 8th grade it had gotten pretty bad, and I really just wanted it to end. Let's call him Chris. When looking for a lost parrot on my property, I found the bottom half of some animal, may have been a muskrat, groundhog, or something similar, but I couldn't be sure exactly what, under a tree and brought it back to the house. I then called my mom, who was out of town traveling at the time, how I'd go about making it stop stinking. This was before I could really just Google it. She wouldn't really help me because I wouldn't tell her why I wanted to disinfect a dead rodent. But I let it sit out in the sun, this was late May, for a few days, and that killed most of the bugs and whatnot. I then wrapped it up in butcher paper, and put it in a paper bag. I then wrote, "Dear Chris, you forgot your lunch this morning. Love, Mom," on it. Chris always brought a bagged lunch into school every single day. In the morning after the first class period started, I went to his locker, no one locked theirs, and put it in his locker. After first period you could hear the screech from the floor below. Along with everyone else, I ran towards the sound and saw Chris walking down the hallway sobbing. I didn't do much to hide the fact that I did it, and was given a day of in-school suspension. The principal didn't find the humor in negotiating for a half day since it was only half a rodent. Chris never really messed with me after that. I couldn't stand this one kid who I went to high school with, who lived a few blocks away in the neighborhood. One night, he sent cops to my parents' house where I was still living, telling them I had done something I didn't do. Luckily I had a receipt in my pocket from the restaurant I was at, in suburb 10 miles away that was time-stamped half an hour later than when he said the incident occurred. Regardless, my parents were woken up, etc. etc. I was pissed. Well, a few days later, my mom bought some plants that she left in the kitchen window. Our family cat was a nutball to begin with, but all of a sudden he was constantly jumping on the counters, eating these plants. When I try and shoo him down, he would actually take a defensive stance and hiss and scratch. 10 minutes later, he would be back, chewing on the leaves. I asked my mom what the plants were, and she said, "Oh, they are catnip. They have a really pretty flower. I'm going to plant them in the backyard when the weather warms up." I was like, "Not a chance you're planting these in our backyard. Look what you're doing to the cat. He's an aggressive stoner. You'll bring every cat in the neighborhood, and they will all fight, all night long." Suddenly, at that exact moment, a revenge plot was born. The following night, I snuck into his backyard and planted the catnip everywhere. My friend who lived across the street from him told me it worked perfectly. And that he was always complaining about cats fighting in his backyard after that. Revenge. No physical confrontation, no property damage, just stoned cats. Felt a little like some sort of supervillain, sending out my cat minions to do my dirty work. This kid picked on me since first grade. Then one day in fourth grade, the teacher had her back turned, so he climbed under my table and started pulling faces at me, not sure why. He was kinda weird. It must have been a knee-jerk reaction, but his face was there and my foot was here, so I kicked him. In the face. Kid falls to ground shrieking while clutching his head. Teacher turns around and sees him out of his desk. Gives him detention. Later that day, his face had swollen to the size of a volleyball and he had stopped crying long enough to tell the teacher what had happened. My teacher asked me if it was true and I said I felt something tugging on my shoe, so I kicked, thinking it was caught on something. The teacher gave me a lollipop, saying be aware of my surroundings next time. The kid never bothered me again. Best day ever. When I was in junior high, I used to hang out with these dudes during PE class. Then, they turned into douchebags. They started bullying other kids, not participating in any of the activities, etc. I started getting in trouble just by hanging out with them, so I stopped. Of course, I was now a pussy. They would do things like try to push me while running track, gang up on me in sports, etc. Well, one day I opened my lunch to find my dessert missing. This went on for days and I had no idea where it was going. I then saw one of the dudes eating it while laughing at the lunch table and shooting me, knowing glances. I could have easily beat this fucker down, but I was never into physical violence. So I thought. And I thought. And I schemed. And it hit me. The next week, I brought homemade brownies. Mondays were fine. Tuesdays were fine. Wednesdays were fine. Thursdays had a little surprise in them in the form of chocolate laxatives. While he was eating the brownie during lunch, I approached him. I told him I knew he was stealing my desserts and he should stop. "What are you going to do about it?" was his reply to the laughs of his little cronies. I turned around and walked away. We found ourselves in PE class a bit later that afternoon. It was time for calisthenics. Jumping jacks, sit-ups, stretching, and oh my god, what the hell was the scream from a girl a few rows over from me. This kid shit so much his entire gym shorts were soaked with brown liquid. It was going down his legs, it was filling his shoes. He tried to run out of the gym, but slipped in the shit water and got it all over his body and some on his face. For 2 weeks he didn't come to school. While he was gone, the rumors started. Some said he died. Some said he was shitting blood. None of those were true. He was so fucking embarrassed and he knew what he was coming back to. This happened in 7th grade. We parted ways after junior high when I went to private high school. However, I heard that the shit incident followed him through high school. No one would hang out with him. He was a social pariah. Now, keep in mind I had no idea it would turn out like that. I figured he would get stomach cramps and diarrhea that night. I had no idea he would end up taking a shit bath in the middle of gym in front of everyone. But I didn't regret it, and still don't. He was a piece of shit that deserved what he got. Not really sure if he suspected me or not. If he did, he never let on. At my school we had a douchebag who liked to stand next to his locker talking to one of his friends, and when someone got too close to it he'd slam it open into their face. As there were no cameras near this hallway, it was always dismissed as an accident. Anyways, one day he felt the need to open it into my best friend's face. Gave him a bloody nose and almost broke it. Now, as I'm sure you all would be, I was pissed off. So the day my friend got back, the douche felt the need to approach him to apologize about hitting my friend. Luckily, my locker was located between my friend and the other kid. When I saw I could do it, I casually unlocked my locker, waited for him to get close to it, and slammed it into him. Broke his nose and dented the locker. Revenge is sweet.